Welcome to this first video about White Mensural Notation. I'm Ricardus and my job is to help you to learn Renaissance music theory and to discover all the secrets about early music. This video is the first video of another series about the White Mensural Notation. So, before starting, what is White Mensural Notation? White Mensural Notation is the music notation system that has been used in the Renaissance. In this first video I show you which are all the figures of White Mensural Notation. With White Mensural Notation we can write the figured chant. What is the figured chant? The figured chant is the chant that we can write with different values, with different figures. It is the opposite of the plain chant. In fact, the plain chant is composed of notes that have all the same value. This is why it is called plain chant. It is a plain chant. So the figured chant is a chant with different figures. So which are all these figures? We have 8 figures that are: the first is the maxima. This figure is the maxima. It is the longest figure we can have in a Renaissance music page. Maxima. Then we have the longa. This is the longa. We can also write the longa in this way, with the line that goes to the top. So this is the longa. The third figure is the brevis, that is a simple square. Brevis. Another figure, the fourth figure, is the semi-brevis. This is the semi-brevis. So we have another 4 figures that are the minima, and we have the semi-minima, so we have the chroma, that is a minima with a little line at the right in the top, the chroma. I write chroma with the H because in all the Italian language the chroma is written with the H, not in modern Italian. And the last note is the semi-chroma. That is like a chroma but with another movement, another little line on the pilum. This is the pilum. The pilum. This line is called pilum. We will see the pilum in White Mensural Notation in another context. But now remember that the chroma is with a single line and the semichroma is with another line. So in this way, here there is the line of the staff. So I write here in this way. This is the semi-chroma. So these figures are the figures of White Mensural Notation. Why it is called White Mensural Notation? Because as you can see, all the figures, not semichroma, chroma and semi-minima, are white. In fact, the mensural notation became white in the 15th century. Before it was black, so all these figures, semibrevis, brevis, longa and maxima, was black. In the Renaissance, for some reason that are not important in this video, because this is a practical video, the black mensural notation became white mensural notation. So these are the figures of white mensural notation and the figure chant. Another thing we have to talk about that is strictly connected with with all the figures is the mensuration. The mensuration is the relationship between the value of one note and that of the next smaller degree. So, for example, if I consider the maxima, which is the mensuration of the maxima, the mensuration of the maxima is the relationship between the maxima and the next smaller degree. The value, the relationship between the mensuration of the maxima and the next smaller degree, so the longa. The relationship between the maxima and the longa is the mensuration of the maxima. In a similar way, the mensuration of the longa is the relationship between the longa and the brevis. The mensuration of the brevis is the relationship between the value of the brevis and the value of the semibrevis. So we can do this reasoning for all the figures. So, but what really is mensuration? The mensuration is a question. So, how many longas the maxima contains? So let's see a practical case, a practical example. Now let me cancel the board. Okay, as I said, the mensuration is the relationship between the value of one note and that of the next smaller degree. So let's consider the maxima. This is the maxima. So which is the relationship between the value of the maxima and the value of the longa? We have two cases. The first case is when the maxima contains 3 longas. So this is the first case. The maxima contains 3 longas. So ask to you, how many longas does the maxima contain? In this case, the maxima contains 3 longas. So the mensuration in this case is called perfect, because the maxima contains 3 longas. In the second case, the maxima contains only 2 longas. And in the second case, the mensuration is called imperfect. So the mensuration can be perfect or imperfect. As you can see, I wrote the maxima in the same way with when it is perfect and when it is imperfect. Because in white mensural notation we don't have to put the dot near the note to make them perfect. So let's see an example that is more familiar than this example. So let's consider the semibrevis. This is the semibrevis. When the mensuration of the semibrevis is perfect, the semibrevis contains, so ask you, how many minimas because the minima is the next smaller degree of the semibrevis. How many minimas does the semibrevis contain? When the mensuration is perfect, the semibrevis contains 3 minimas. But when the mensuration is imperfect, how many minimas does the semibrevis contain? When the mensuration is imperfect, the semibrevis contains only 2 minimas. But in both cases, I wrote the semibrevis without the dot in the perfect situation. Why? Because it is not modern notation. In modern notation, I must write the first example like this. The semibrevis is round because all the White Mensural Notation is written with the square notation because all the figures are squared. In modern notation, all the figures are round. So this is the semibrevis that with the dotted semibrevis contains 3 minimas. This is a modern notation. But in a White Mensural Notation, it isn't the same thing. When I have in modern notation the semibrevis alone, I have only 2 minimas. So as you can see, in White Mensural Notation, it is not necessary to dot the semibrevis to make them perfect. This rule is right for all the figures that can be perfect and imperfect. So now let's write all the examples. So now let's see the maxima. As I said before, the maxima can be perfect when it contains 3 longas, or can be imperfect when it contains 2 longas. So we can have the longa that can be perfect when the longa contains 3 brevis, and the longa can be imperfect when the longa contains 2 brevis. Perfect, imperfect. So we can have also the brevis that can be perfect when it contains 3 semibrevis, and imperfect when it contains 2 semibrevis. And the last case is when the semibrevis is perfect, it contains 3 minimas. And when the semibrevis is imperfect, it contains 2 minimas. So let's recap and see and visualize all the cases. In the first case, the maxima is perfect. So how many longas does the maxima contain? 3. Perfect. How many longas does the maxima contain? 2. Imperfect. So the same thing is for the longa. Longa, perfect longa, 3 semibrevis. Imperfect longa, 2 brevis. Perfect brevis, 3 semibrevis. Perfect imperfect brevis, 2 semibrevis. Perfect semibrevis, 3 minimas. Imperfect semibrevis, 2 minimas. So I said that these rules is right for all the figures that can be perfect and imperfect, because all the note, all the value from starting from the minima and going to the semichroma can be only imperfect. So now let's see the other situations. In fact, the minima can be only imperfect. So in the minima can only be two semi-minimas. And the semi-minima can contain only two chromas. And the chroma can contain only two semichromas. So we can divide all the figures in two groups. The maxima, longa, brevis and semibrevis can be perfect or imperfect. And the minima, the semi-minima and the chroma can be only imperfect. So another thing is to know how all the mensurations are called. Now let's cancel the board. Now let's consider the maxima case. So the maxima, as I said, can be perfect or imperfect. But how is called the mensuration of the maxima? The mensuration of the maxima is called modus maximarum. The modus maximarum, that is the modus, the mood of maximas, the modus maximarum is the name of the mensuration of the maxima. So when the modus maximarum is perfect, the maxima is perfect. So it can be called also modus major. The modus major is another name that we can use to call the mensuration of the maxima. And the third name that can we use is the maxi modus. All these three names refer to the mensuration of the maxima. So when the modus maximarum is perfect, the maxima is perfect. When the modus major is perfect, the maxima is perfect. When the maximodus is perfect, the maxima is perfect. The same thing happens with the longa. So how is the mensuration of the longa called? The mensuration of the longa is called modus longarum, or another name is modus minor. So in English, the modus major and modus minor can be translated as greater mood, and the modus minor as lesser mood. So this is the name of the mensuration of the longa. But we can also call it like simply modus. Modus. The modus is the mensuration of the longa, maximodus of the maxima. So these are the names of the mensuration of the maxima and the longa. The mensuration of the brevis is called tempus, only tempus. So when the tempus is perfect, the brevis is perfect. So the brevis contains three semibrevis. When the tempus is imperfect, the brevis contains only two semibrevis. And the mensuration of the semibrevis is called prolatio. So when the prolatio of the semibrevis is perfect, the semibrevis contains three minimas. When the prolatio of the semibrevis is imperfect, the semibrevis contains only two minimas. The mensuration of the prolatio can be also called major and minor. not perfect or imperfect, it is the same thing. So the prolatio, when it is perfect, it can also called major. And when it is imperfect, it is the same thing to say that it is minor in Latin or English. Minor in Latin, minor in English, major in Latin, major in English. So now what you have to remember in this video, for the first video about white mensural notation. We have 8 figures, 8: maxima, longa, brevis, semibrevis, minima, semiminima, chroma and semichroma. All the figures have the mensuration. The mensuration is the relationship between the value of one note and that of the next one degree. The mensuration can be perfect or imperfect, and only the maxima, the longa, the brevis and the semibrevis can be perfect or imperfect, because the minima, semiminima, the chroma and semichroma can be only imperfect. So for this first video about white mensural notation, it is enough. I remember you that if you want the PDF of this video with all what I wrote at the board, you can download it subscribing the semibrevis membership on my Patreon page. And if you want to send me your exercises about white mensural notation or figure base or other thing I do on my channel, or your personal exercises, and you want that I correct them, you can subscribe the Brevis membership. So if you are interested on early music theory, I remember you that I've created the first solmisation video course at the world. So if you want to learn solmisation like a real 16th century musician, with this promo code you can have a 20% off on the video course that is available in 3 different options. So thank you for your visualization, and I'm waiting for you in the next video with rests.